Welcome to Live with Anton Gunn. It's Wednesday, 2 p.m. East Coast time, 11 a.m. Pacific time. To everybody in the Central time zone, in the Mountain time zone, it's time to get in where you fit in. Today, I want to really bring something home to everyone. And I'm going to do it by sharing an experience that I had recently with a client. And the thing that I want to bring home is that we are in a new era of work. Now, when I say new era of work, what I'm saying to you is that no matter what you think your life and job was before 2020, we're in a new era now. Like whatever you were doing before 2020 is not even really relevant to the way your workforce exists today, the way your business model is existing today. There's a lot of changes happening, and I call it the new era of work, where employees are now hired not just for a job description, but for what functionally they can provide to an organization, where leadership is making decisions not based upon some outdated strategy, but they're responding to things in real time. And so in this new era of work, there's one thing that is a constant as a part of this new era of work. And some would even challenge that even in the old era of work, this thing was also a constant. And I'm willing to concede that point. And what I'm talking about is change. Change is a constant in this new era of work, and maybe it was a constant in the old era of work. Now, when I say change, I want you to really think about that every organization is going through some evolutions. They're going through a change process that they were doing something and they're now coming in perspective that what they were doing is not going to work in this new era of work. So they need to change their business model. They need to change from being an in-person mandated workforce to a total percent virtual workforce. Or we need to change from, having everybody do this type of job function to doing this type of job function. I'm pretty sure that you're experiencing change where you work right now. So if you want to, please drop into the chat one thing that has changed about your workplace from before the COVID-19 George Floyd era to after the COVID-19 George Floyd era. What has changed for you in your workplace? So I'm going to give you a chance to think about like what those big changes are that you've seen come down. And if you are a senior level leader that is leading that change, today's conversation is really about you and around the qualities that you need to embody, that you need to embrace, that you need to understand, that you need to own, that you really need to get as detailed as you possibly can if you hope to lead effectively in this new era of work, if you hope to lead change effectively in this new era of work. Because that's the operative thing, work is how do you lead change? How do you get people bought in? Now, before I give you the 5 qualities, let me share with you an experience that I had with a client recently. My client is a very large, very powerful, very impactful organization. They've been around a very long time, and change is not new to them and their organization. Like literally every decade or so, they make some kind of a change. Sometimes it's changing their logo, sometimes it's changing their brand strategy, sometimes it's changing their priorities, it's changing their customer base. They might change anything in order to feel relevant, in order to feel they're on the cutting edge, in order to feel that they're continuing to innovate. And that's a big important part of all organizations. They need to find a way to continue to innovate. So change is not foreign to this organization, but they're now in the process of doing some new changes, a new strategy, a new strategic approach. And I got the opportunity to participate in a strategy session about this new approach. Now, here's what I want you to understand. The conversation was rich. The conversation was deep. The conversation was really impactful. And I'm so excited about what they're endeavoring to do and that I get to participate in some small way in that process. I'm excited about this change. But I will tell you one of the things that I heard from the CEO that really stood out to me. It was the quote of the day, if you will. I think y'all have probably seen these people who will sometimes post on social media the quote of the day. Well, the quote of the day was that jargon is the enemy of effective communication. And this is the CEO's way of explaining that if we continue to use the same old jargon that we've always used, that we understand and our existing stakeholders understand, our existing customer, client base, vendors that we work with, if we just continue to use that same language, then we're not going to reach the new target customer base that we hope to reach. We're not going to have the impact that we want to have. So we can't use this old jargon anymore. We have to change our language and be more effective in our communications. And so this whole conversation was about how they communicate externally to their customers. The whole conversation was about how do we communicate externally to our stakeholders. But after sitting in that meeting and having conversations over lunch, having conversations, off in the corner doing breaks, is that one thing was real clear to me is that leading this change is going to be really problematic for the senior level leaders in this organization if they don't embrace the qualities that I'm about to share with you. Now, when I say embrace the qualities of what I'm about to share with you, I really want to talk about, as a leader, if you lead a team or an organization, there's some qualities that you need to embrace and that you need to think about if you really want people to be invested in the change. Because let's be reality of this. No organization moves just because the leadership said move, unless it's the military. If you're in the United States military and they say move, you better do what you're told. But all of us have a choice to work in the organization that we're in. We don't have to be here. We don't have to stay there. So if a change comes and you're not bought in, invested, clear about the change and how it makes a difference for you in this new era of work, employees will throw up two fingers and say deuces and I'm out the door. So in this new era of work, you have to lead change in an effective way if you really want to have the impact, because otherwise you're going to lose people. They're going to self-select to not participate in the changes in which you make. Now, you might, to some degree, say, well, that's okay. If we lose some people, everybody's not going with us. But here's what I want you to understand. You need to minimize the amount of losses of people who are not invested in the change. Why? Because they all have intellectual capital. They have social capital in the organization. They know things. They could be effective in helping you to lead the change. But if you don't embody these qualities that I'm getting ready to talk about, you might lead change in the wrong way and lose the people that you actually need to have the impact. That would be a failure of leadership if you needed to make a drastic change or a subtle change, and the people who you need to help you carry out that change don't go with you because they're not invested, they don't believe, they don't understand, they haven't bought into the change. I'm not even talking about your customers. I'm not talking about your stakeholders. I'm not talking about the people who you really feel like would be totally in love with the direction that you're going in. I'm talking about the people inside the belly of the beast of your company that you need them to buy in, redo their processes, come up with action plans, come up with an approach, come up with the design and the brand and the marketing to tell the whole world about the changes that you're getting ready to make. You need them. So you have to understand what it takes to lead in this new era. What is the new brand of leadership to lead through change? And so I put a blog together to talk a little bit more detail about the 5 qualities, if you will. I didn't phrase them like that in the blog. I just wanted to talk about 5 subjects that are really, really important if you want to lead in the midst of constant change. If you want to successfully lead in the midst of a change process, what we can call change leadership, change management, new culture, whatever you want to call it. If you want to be effective and lead, Here are the 5 qualities. And you might want to write these down if you got a pen. If you don't have time to write them down, that's okay. This video is not going away. It'll stay right here on this platform so you can come back and watch it at any time. You can bookmark it and come back at it. Okay, so let's jump right in. The first quality that you need to embrace, and the first thing that you need to understand, that if you're going to lead in this new era, you're going to lead through constant change, you got to first define your vision and your values. You got to lead with your vision and your values. Let me unpack that a little bit. You have to have a vision of where you're going. So when I say vision, I'm talking about a 10-year vision. What does your organization and everybody you touch look like 10 years from now? What does it look like? If you can't state in a narrative form, what does the world look like after you have made the change and delivered on the impact? What does the world look and feel like? If you can't come up with that vision, you're going to lose people. People are not going to buy in to whatever you're selling because they can't see the vision, because you didn't paint the vision. You didn't lay out the vision. Now, part of that vision is that everybody needs to know that this vision is in total alignment with your values. See, values are something that shouldn't change. Like if you're going to change how you do business, if you're going to change your work, your values should be concrete and foundational enough that any change can stand on top of the values. So if your value is to have respect and dignity for all people, no matter what changes you make, you should always have respect and dignity for all people. If you value your customer experience, then it doesn't matter what change you make. People need to be able to see that even though we change things, we still value our customer experience. If you say that my employees are important, that our people are our priority, no matter what change you go through, you need to be able to demonstrate that your people are still a priority. So quality number 1 is having a vision and values that everybody can see and know and buy into. And as a leader, your job is to communicate that vision and those values. That's quality number 1. Quality number 2, yes, you shouldn't be surprised I'm going to say this one, is inclusion. Inclusion. The last thing you need to be trying to do in leading a change process is to lead a change process and not include the people who are most affected by the change. And that is your frontline employees. Like I literally had to have a conversation that you got to make sure that the front line is bought into it. Now, what do I mean front line? I'm talking about your frontline managers need to be brought into it. And your frontline customer service people need to be brought into it. Let me give you a specific example. I worked with a client before who was making some changes, and they had this whole strategic planning process that I helped them through. You had the executive team around the table. We spent 2 days putting up charts and graphs and Post-it notes and coming up with a new vision, a new framework. We did all of that great intensive work in an executive leadership retreat. And then they brought in their number 2. So the one level below the C-suite were brought in to buy into the vision and see how all of this was going to work together. So they're doing all this strategic thinking and all these other things. It was great time. But the one thing that nobody thought to do and didn't follow my direction to do so is to socialize all of the stuff that we came up with the management level workforce. Like literally put a group of 25 key managers who've been with you a long time, who have high employee engagement scores, who really are productive and invested in the company. Like they're not leaving. These are not fly by night people. that you should invest in sharing this message with them before taking it forward. Make sure you get their feedback. Now, why did I recommend that? Because here's what I know has happened, will happen, and will always happen. That if you don't get those middle managers brought in, and then you make this big announcement that we're, going in this direction with our business and service, every frontline employee is going to go right to their supervisor and say, hey, Bob, what do you know about this stuff that's coming out of the C-suite? If Bob says, man, I ain't never heard of that stuff, get back to work. Or if Bob says, I ain't on board with that, that's a bunch of change brains. Or as some people would say, that's the same old gravy just warmed over. If Bob, the direct manager to the frontline team, responds like that, you know what that means? Bob is not invested in the change, and nobody that works for Bob is going to be invested in the change, which means it's going to take you longer to get it done. So you got to understand that you got to do more than just do the strategic planning stuff up at the top. You got to make sure that you are inclusive to the breadth and depth of your workforce to get them all invested and enrolled in where you're going before you run out here and try to tell the whole world. Because if you start telling the whole world before you start telling your own people are going to reject it because they ain't going to believe it or not bought into it or not be aligned with it. And most importantly, they see stuff that you don't see. Like the important part of inclusion is for people who have a very different perspective than you to be able to see what you don't see. And you can't do that if you don't value inclusion, if you don't embrace the quality of being an inclusive leader, to collaborate, to gain intelligence, to basically bring people in. If that's not you, then you're not ready to lead change in this new era. So that's the second quality. The second principle is inclusion. The third quality is you got to be adaptive. Now, when I say adaptive, here's what I want you to understand. That there's a quote that I've heard, and we probably have all heard this one, is that man plans, God laughs. And that quote basically says that you can make the best plan that you want to have, but something is going to happen and it's going to require you to change the change that you were trying to change. Literally, it's going to happen. Mike Tyson has a famous quote too, was everybody got a plan until they get punched in the face. And when it comes to leading change in this new era, you're going to get punched in the face. You might have a plan, but there's going to be some unexpected haymaker that's going to drop right in front of your face and requires you to change the plan that you had set to make change. You don't believe me? Ask anybody who was going through a company reorganization in 2019, or they made a decision that they were going to abandon their remote work policy and that they were only going to focus on in-office policies. And then the pandemic hit and they had to go into a different direction. Or what about the company who for years refused to acknowledge race and diversity as a part of their business and their workforce, and then they recognized that they were having mutiny and rebellion and rejection because of the employees of color, how they had been treated for many, many years? Or what about the companies in the industries like Amazon, Apple, Wells Fargo? These are companies who are professional companies, companies known as tech companies or financial services giants. But those same companies now are dealing with union organization. So whatever plans that they had, they now have to change them because something happened. So for the leaders of those companies, when those changes come, do you know how to adapt? Do you know how to improvise? Do you know how to be flexible and open and malleable to be able to respond to the change rather than saying, hey, I'm going in this direction and I don't care what's going down, I'm not going to stop? Or going back to the second point, what if you didn't include some senior key leaders that has a lot of positional and situational authority in the organization? Hey, they might even have positional authority. They might just be very influential. The employee that's been on the team for 29 years. And then because they're not on board with the change, they decide to just, I'm not down with this, I'm quitting. Now, what do you think that's going to do to the morale of your workforce when an employee that everybody loves and respects and values because of their long-term commitment to the organization, they decide to just walk away after 29 years? That is going to require you to adapt. That's the third one. So be adaptive. The fourth one is the one that I think so many leaders have missed the mark on through the pandemic, through in general. I mean, going all the way back to, I don't know, say the early 1900s that they missed the mark on this one. And that is, you need to be a compassionate and empathetic leader during the change process. Now, when I say compassionate and empathetic, you have to recognize that people don't like change. Change is hard. Change is disruptive. Change hurts. Change can hurt. And you need to have some empathy and compassion for people who may be negatively affected by the change. So whether it's the introduction of artificial intelligence that's going to zero out and downsize some jobs, or whether it's a recession or a global pandemic that's going to force you to lay off a lot of people, that's going to change your business. So how empathetic and compassionate are you for the people who have been impacted by that? How compassionate are you? Or more specifically, how are you compassionate about people who are left behind after something like a downsize or a layoff? Like, that's the thing that people forget. Now, let's just imagine that your CEO comes in and says, you know what, we're still bleeding money. And I'm not talking about any company in particular, but I know Airbnb is going through this challenge right now, that they're literally losing revenue significantly. They're losing money big time. And so much so, they had to make some layoffs. And when they made those layoffs, let me tell you how compassionate the leader was. The leader was so compassionate that he picked up the phone and called other companies to try to get his people jobs at those other companies, because he knew he had to lay them off and they have families, but he didn't just lay them off and throw them to the wolves. He tried to help them to get something else. That's an empathetic and compassionate approach to downsizing. It also means having a conversation with a team who's left behind once you downsize. Because, could you imagine being on a team with like 10 people and then 5 people got laid off and now there's only 5 of you left? Y'all are hurting too. Your coworkers who you spent time beside month after month is not there anymore. So as an executive, you need to be counseling, coaching, and helping the team that is left behind after you have a massive change like a layoff. So again, number 4 is empathy and communication. Now, the last quality of a leader who can lead in this new era of change, that quality is literacy. No, and I'm not talking about your ability to read a book, your ability to read a report, your ability to read a website. When I say literacy, I'm talking about human literacy. How much do you understand people, the socioeconomics, the environmental factors that may be affecting the people that you need to lead through the change process? Like, for instance, you probably have some employees now who are in the sandwich generation. You in the sandwich generation. That is, you're raising kids at home, and you also might be taking care of an aging parent. So you got your mom in your house and you got your kids in the house. And that's putting a lot of stress on you. So imagine if you have employees who are going through this same kind of socioeconomic impact. That's a financial impact to now have to take care of your parents and raise your kids at the same time, all under the same roof. Or a spouse or partner may have lost a job or decided to go back to school. Or maybe your kids that you paid for to go through college and get that big degree from that big expensive school doesn't have a job and they decide to move back home. And now you got student loan debt and all kinds of other stuff on your shoulders, and you're struggling to figure out, what am I going to do? That's what your employees are going to do. And so you need to have some literacy about how all of the ways your people might be impacted. What are the environmental factors that might be affecting them? And when I say environmental factors, I'm not just talking about lead-based paint and pollution. I'm talking about what's going on. Was there a massive school shooting at their kid's school and therefore they're worried about sending their kid to school? Or maybe there is something going on with climate change that could be impacting what they do every day. These are all of the things you need to think about. And when I say literacy, I'm talking about understanding people, being literate in personality types, being literate in behavioral actions inside of an organization. Behavior determines your actions. So you need to be literate in the behaviors of your team. You need to be literate in the diversity of the human experience, that everybody might come in a different way. If you understand that these 5 qualities are essential to leading in the constant era of change, to be a new leader in the era of change, you're going to win. But if you don't understand, you're going to struggle. And so my whole goal was to give you some insight to these new qualities, how to lead in a constant era of change, what it means to be a new leader in this new world of work. You got to have these 5 qualities. That's vision and values. That's inclusivity. That's being adaptive, empathetic and compassionate, and most importantly, being literate. Those are the 5 qualities that you need to embrace. So I hope this message helped some of you. Hope it helped all of you, actually. But I know some of you will apply it and take it to heart. Try to improve yourself in these areas. If you want more, make sure you go to antongunn.com/blog and read my latest blog post on this subject. I want to thank you for watching. Everybody have a fantastic day.